Hi, everyone. Welcome to GreenCircle Certified's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a lot of good content to give you out today. And so my name is Sarah Risley. I'm the certification officer at GreenCircle Certified. So I get to oversee all of the standards and certifications that we offer. And for those of you that aren't familiar, GreenCircle Certified is a third-party certification body. So we are really here to provide services to recognize products, services, systems, facilities for their sustainability claims, environmental claims, energy efficiency. And really our goal is to help businesses and consumers really look at and identify those environmentally responsible and energy efficient products that you can recognize with certifications. And so before we dive into our topic, global standards in sustainable energy, reducing carbon footprint and certifying impact, a couple of housekeeping things just to keep us all aligned on GoToWebinar. So questions. Any questions you have, enter them into the question pane and we'll be collecting those. And then we have some time at the end where we'll spend time answering those questions. If you have a question and it doesn't get answered, we will definitely follow up and make sure we get those answers out after the webinar. The second big thing is we've got a couple of polls for you guys to engage with us on. Please don't forget to click submit when you enter your answer. That way we can review all the results with the group. So thank you for participating in the polls. They're very general questions, but it's a great way for us to get feedback and share as a group. The chat is disabled, but everything will show in the question pane so that you will be able to answer, or we'll be able to answer questions at the end. And then the last housekeeping thing before we dive in, we are going to record this and we'll distribute it out to all of the registrants in the next day or so. So let's dive in. Here's our agenda for today. So we're really going to start off at the 50,000 foot view. So really looking at, okay, what are common global sustainability practices that are being used today? How are in certain industries policy and impacting that? And then really, how does that help you then find a path to reducing your carbon footprint? And majority of what we're going to be talking through today is one aspect of that, which is sustainable energy practices and how important those are to really evaluate and understand for reducing your carbon footprint, the role of renewable energy in that, and then finally talking a little bit about the last step in your process, which is recognize all of the great work that you've done in developing those sustainability systems and products to be able to recognize it with certification. So let's dive in and start off with this kind of global overview of the sustainable trends and practices that are happening today. And so I wanted to bucket these into a couple of kind of core pillars so that we could really understand and see the role of energy in our global sustainability trends. And so first off, we've got transition to renewable energy. So think things like solar panels, incorporating hydropower, really converting and investing in that infrastructure. Energy and fuel efficiency is huge. So thinking of things like electric vehicles, really reducing our ability to require energy, so that energy demand, so that we're using less fossil fuels overall. Waste diversion strategies. So this is all about circular economy, recycling, making sure that we're sending less material to the landfill to create methane. And then the last one, which is huge, is the decarbonization. So really looking at how are we sourcing materials, what can we do in the design of our products, but also in the design of our operations that's really going to help us reduce our overall carbon. So giving you guys a little bit of that high level trend, let's go one more layer down and look at how are some of the leading industries really using some of these pillars to innovate and bring forward sustainable practices that really impact your ability to reduce your GHG emissions And of course, the first one is renewable energy. So this is a significant investment across the world right now. So, this is an industry that was maybe very small and has really seen a lot of growth. In 2023, the clean energy jobs in the US grew by 5%, which was like 150,000 jobs. And what's really great about that statistic, you guys, is that growth rate compared to the US overall employment growth rate was double for the same period. And so you can really see how renewable energy is something that folks are really investing in and taking advantage of. And so things like solar panels for housing, for commercial manufacturing facilities, looking at different energy storage solutions so that we can share energy and save it. And really that industry is all about innovation and bringing forward the infrastructure. The next one that we wanted to highlight was transportation. So we can have a lot of just focus on electric vehicles, but I want you guys to also think about things like high speed rail systems and other ways that we're even looking at how we're spending fuel on storage and transportation in your supply chain. Consumer goods is the next leading industry, and so where consumer goods is really strong is on the circular economy side. So, really establishing take-back programs, refillable, recycled materials being incorporated into your products, or knowing that you can recycle your product when your consumer is done with it, and really understanding how your product design impacts not only you as the manufacturer, but also, what is the impact when the consumer is using it as well. So that cradle to grave type understanding, and really for us that is also then on your supply chain accountability. And so we'll talk a little bit about that and how those scope 3 emissions really do have a significant impact, especially for consumer goods. And so being able to sustainably source for your products and for your operations is really, really critical, and something that the consumer goods industry is taking a lot of innovation with. Lastly is real estate. So I can't have a sustainability webinar without mentioning LEED. So LEED was started in 1998. They have almost 200,000 buildings certified for their environmental and energy efficiencies. And so that is a real testament to us, in that industry, really taking not only new construction to a new level of accountability and transparency, but also retrofitting existing buildings and really using that as a way to continue to provide guidance and recognition for those buildings, especially on the commercial side, that meet those requirements. And so kind of looking at the industries, why are people doing this? Like what's with all the sustainability? And so, there's a lot of awareness. So, for us, it's our mission. We see a lot of value and a lot of commitments to reducing GHG emissions and really having a positive impact on climate change. And so really for you guys though, it's also about the policy. So with this awareness, it's driving policymakers to generate and implement programs and regulations that are holding us accountable, and they're going to continue to mandate reporting, to start to incentivize and deliver on our commitments, especially at a regulatory or a government level, where the US has committed, the UN has committed, and really trying to take those policy decisions. And so I put a couple of examples that I just wanted to highlight specifically around energy and how kind of policies are looking there. So, like renewable energy incentives are a huge program where even in the US, you can get tax credits for transitioning to solar or wind energy usage. Germany has a national energy plan, so their entire country is really, choosing to move towards transitioning to renewable energy sources. And then the last one is centered around carbon, so really taking that accountability to the next level and looking at every piece of emission, every molecule of carbon dioxide that your organization needs to count and be held accountable for. And so that that tracking system in the EU, and also I think just consumer awareness have driven policymakers to really increase their focus on accountability and transparency in the upcoming regulations and things we're seeing right now, even with California on GHG emissions. They're going to mandate those reporting for larger companies starting next year. And so this is something that you really want to kind of balance and keep in mind, not only with your company's goals, but also with where you're going to be going and what you're going to need to comply with in the future as policymakers continue to drive these accountability regulations. So we have our first poll that we would love for you guys to answer, and it's a really general question. We're just really interested in understanding the strategies that your company is currently using to reduce their carbon footprint. So, just picking which one of these just resonates with you, or that you're aware that, you guys are trying to really implement and use as a strategy to reduce your carbon footprint. So we'll give just a few minutes, just a few, maybe 30 seconds for answers, and then we'll be able to share with the group. I love the polls. So thank you guys for answering and engaging. I think it's a great way for us to get to know the group, even though you're all behind a computer screen and I'm behind a computer screen. Ooh, it's a pretty even. So renewable energy in the middle, waste diversion is the least, and then energy efficiency is the most. So I'm really excited to see that energy efficiency is something that that the group is really trying to go after. It's a lot about what we're going to talk about in terms of strategies for reducing your carbon footprint. So the next session or section will really help kind of solidify the story. So, okay, we've got sustainability trends. We know folks are, creating policies and really making this a priority. And so how do you meet your goals? And how are these sustainable practices a path to reducing your carbon footprint? And so for us, it's really centered around the goals that we're putting forward and the science that's being, the research that's being done, the data analysis to really understand where we're going and how we can slow down and not, create too much climate change, right? And so for us, looking at the Paris Agreement, I think is a really great high level view of what the UN and a number of those countries have put forward. It's something that was adopted in 2015 to combat climate change and really pulling in the science and the awareness around the fact that our global temperatures are rising at an unprecedented rate. And so you can see in this graph to the right here, it's kind of looking at the average temperature of the Earth over time. And you can really see the last 20, 30 years, that significant increase in industrialization and really for us, I think, not doing enough. And so where we're at right now is, looking at these key goals for the Paris Agreement, we're not actually on track. And so lots of experts, lots of policymakers, lots of leading scientists in the field are very concerned that we're not on track to keep that global warming for the Paris Agreement goal. And, really for us, that's a call to action. And it's a critical call to action, not just to quickly implement things, but to really understand the science, to really understand the reasons why we want to reduce the global GHG emissions. And so for us, what's going on? Why aren't we meeting this? What are some of the reasons that we're not on track, and how can you, really answer this call to action? And so really splitting it into some of and I won't get into a ton of detail, we'll have upcoming webinars where we'll talk much more about GHG emissions, but really looking at our reliance on fossil fuels and during operations, looking at the direct impact that we have, that's what we call scope 1 emissions, continuing to rely on fossil fuels and energy demanding operations. So looking though at where we're getting our energy is scope 2, And then on the supply chain side, so not having transparency from your suppliers on what their carbon footprint is or how their operations may impact your overall emissions based on your product. And then the last way I feel like we're struggling is really on the waste side. So, excessive consumption, packaging generates a high volume of waste. Looking at your operations to understand how you can minimize waste, incorporate recycling, circular economy strategies, that kind of thing. And so really for us, there are some critical strategies that then we can pair with, okay, what's going on, where are the trends, what industries are doing well in creating these innovative and really helpful technologies. And so that's where you can aligning your business practice. You don't have to create the wheel all over again. It's really about taking what those other industries, what your operation needs, and really trying to align that to reduce your overall emissions. And a lot of that has to do with the energy that you're using and how demanding that is. And so the first one, the best way for you to align your business practice is just to reduce your energy demand overall. So really bringing in some continuous improvement, some operational adjustments, behavior adjustments, so that we can look at how we are using energy over the course of operations, over the course of transportation, and then really pairing that then with the second one, which is leveraging renewable energy. So we won't ever get to a place where we can make the fabulous products and things that we love without actually using energy. And so how do we do that responsibly? So first step, reduce your consumption to the minimum amount. But the next step is then to leverage renewable energy and to really pair that to where the energy that you do need to use is coming from a renewable source, and we're not depleting those fossil fuel resources. The third one is one that many of you mentioned you're already doing, reducing the waste generation, promoting circular economy. So, you're seeing a lot more around refillable, around take-back programs, recycle content, being able to recycle and building out that infrastructure. And so really aligning your new products and understanding how you can support that kind of leads to the next one, which is innovate your products. So, really driving for sustainable product innovation. And it starts at the beginning of the product development process, right? And even on the building side, how you design and how the architects are putting together the materials that they need, how to heat a building, that type of thing. And so really being innovative, and most of that is around materialization. How are we optimizing the life cycle of your products, the materials that you're using, are they sustainably sourced? And then, really for product innovation, I wanted to highlight certifications. This is a great way to align and provide that credibility that, your innovative product, your new technology, really does meet the mark. And then the last, kind of going back to the energy side, is really talking about adopting electric vehicles and sustainable logistic practices. This is huge. If you think about one example I wanted to give was in the cleaning products industry. So if you make cleaning products, we really want you to not ship it diluted. And so there's a lot of requirements around those certifications for sustainable cleaning products that require you to ship a concentrate so that you're shipping way less weight. And so it requires less logistics, less operations for you to send, and then even looking at how can you regionally localize things. And so it goes beyond just one strategy here, you guys. Aligning it really is how they come together and what you can get the most out of. And so really, for us, I think the driver though for this is that we want to have this global climate change. But I wanted to, kind of ask this poll question before we dive into sustainable energy practices specifically, to get you guys to start thinking about how important do you think that carbon footprint is to your customers. And so there's a lot of discussion from us about, the policy requirements and the just business goals that everyone has around the strategy, and really the commitment to reducing that carbon footprint. And so However, I think a lot of it then, because there's so much education and becoming aware, right, through policies, through regulations, through education, through certifications, for us to, really have more drivers from consumers. And so we just wanted to see, like, what are you guys experiencing? And love it. So I love to see not important as the lowest amount, you guys. So that's amazing. Somewhat important is the highest, and then very important is in the middle. And so I think this is really resonating with your customers. And one of the really important things for me, as we kind of go through the next couple of sections where we specifically talk about those energy practices, is really to understand how do you recognize that? How do you put all of the effort into your products so that your consumers can actually see and understand your story? So sustainable energy practices is what we really want to focus on as one of the big pillars for you to reduce your overall GHG emissions. And the reason that we're focusing on this, you guys, is because the energy sector is responsible for 3/4 of the global emissions. And so it's very clear based on that data that transforming it will be critical to tackling the climate crisis. So really looking at how we're using energy, the types of energy that we're using. And so 80% of the world's primary energy is generated from fossil fuels. And we know that fossil fuels are a limited resource. They are not sustainable for the future. We will eventually run out of them. And so how do we continue to innovate? How do we continue to evaluate and optimize to really get that number down so that less of our primary energy is generated for fossil fuels? The other key takeaway that I wanted to start this section off with is this 40% number. So 40% of the emissions abatement that we need by 2040 to continue working towards our climate change goals is going to have to come from energy efficiency. And so this is really critical in a couple of ways, not only for us from an environmental impact, but doing this in an innovative way so that we can reach our climate goals without hindering economic progress. So really prioritizing energy efficiency strategies, that's where some of those policies come in, where there's incentives, there's tax breaks, there's helpful grants and money that you can get in order to do this transition. And really to try to balance it for us on the need is there, the science is there, but how do we be innovative enough that we're really understanding and driving that innovation and those kind of novel approaches or new technologies. So to really help you understand, I have a great visual. So this is something I want to walk you guys through, but it's your approach to decarbonization. And so if you look on the left side, you're going to see two bars. The first one is the gray bar, second one is the green bar. So if we look at the emissions today, that's our baseline. What are we currently doing? We haven't implemented a lot, or we've just started to implement some continuous improvement or some strategies for that. And really being able to measure is important, to know where you're starting from. And so that's the gray bar. But as you can imagine, thinking about all the aspirational goals and all the things that you want to do within your strategic plans always means growth, right? Always means new products, expanding your operations across the globe. All of those kind of things will create the green bar, which is that your emissions will not remain stagnant, that as you grow and as you continue to build out and you move to selling in Europe, that type of thing, your emissions is going to grow. And so how do you tackle that? How do you not only reduce your overall baseline, but then have helpful strategies that as you grow and as your emissions become higher, that you're really able to negate that and continue to decrease. And so the bottom line as your axis, as you're moving to the right, is your progress towards your GHG reduction goal. And you'll see that I highlighted these first three strategies in the green box. And the reason that I'm doing that is because these are energy efficiency strategies. So changing things about your operations, behavior changes, not turning on and off lights, even as a simple example, right? The second one is building and equipment upgrades. So this takes a little bit of capital, but it brings you the ROI very quickly if you're able to get that reduction in energy so that that cost goes down. And then finally looking at thermal solutions, electrification, alternative technologies, again, continuing to innovate and bringing in those, just very novel approaches to your manufacturing, and even for distribution, for transportation, all of those types of operational changes. And really what we're seeing here then is you can see from the bars the amount of impact that you can have by simply reducing your overall demand for energy is super critical. And so what does that actually, mean, and how do we do that? And I think the most important takeaway that I want you guys to see from this is that it's a progress. It's a journey that you're going to go on. You're not going to get it overnight. And that it really does take an awareness of where your gray bar is at today in order to really understand what strategies, where you need to focus, and how you can get the return on the investment that you might need to make to upgrade your equipment, for example. And so GreenCircle has really, spent some time to define what energy reduction really means. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time just kind of talking through that, because there's some important aspects of the definition and how we're looking at energy efficiency and measuring that reduction that I think are critical for you to continue to expand on your approach to decarbonization and really impacting, measuring GHG emissions. And so GreenCircle really looks at energy usage reduction in a very specific way. First is that, we're really measuring those conservation measures. And there's some things that count, some things that don't count, which I'll talk a little bit more later. But the most important piece is that we're, again, assessing against the baseline so that we can see what impact we're having, how big, what's the actual progress towards our goals. And then for us, we really want to be able to benchmark to production. And so what that really gives you, if you look at it with this type of framework and this type of definition, is that energy usage reductions that can then be certified per product. And why is that important? Because we're looking at all your operations. So this is really important for us because we want to connect with your consumers. We want it to be very clear that on a per product basis, we can see an overall reduction, and that makes it a good choice for those consumers when they're trying to choose what to buy, and how they can be responsible for that. The other side for our framework that I really wanted to call out too is just energy efficiency provides cost savings. Most of them can be immediate impacts, things that are reducing your carbon emissions. And then really, like I've mentioned, pairing that then, so we can't get to no energy. That makes sense. We're going to need a little bit of energy or some substantial energy to make the products. But really then partnering that with renewable sources to really help us have the biggest impact on not only our operation changes, but also on the emissions that we know we have to address because we can't reduce them. And so, for us, it's really important to kind of look at this. And so I have a case study that I wanted to share with you. It's a great story, you guys, about Toyota. And kind of what they have done in this space on both sides, actually, in looking at energy from an efficiency standpoint in their operations, but then also integrating renewable energy. So Toyota's challenge was that they wanted to cut their carbon emissions, and they recognized that, they have high energy demand. It's a very demanding manufacturing process to make a car, thinking of things like welding, painting, the assembly. And so in order for them to meet their 2050 environmental challenge goals, they are really, needed to put some pretty big investments and solutions in place. And so they did a couple of really great strategies. So they had smart energy management systems. So things like replacing their lighting, optimizing compressed air systems, really looking at their HVAC, that type of thing, process optimizations, trying to understand where they were using energy in their process and upgrading those systems so that they're using less energy. And then finally for them, they really looked at lean and implementing those lean energy practices so that they can monitor and see where there are spikes, see where there are issues where they can continuously improve over time. And finally, they have renewable energy integration. And you can see from their results, they were very successful in how they implemented this on both sides. So 35% reduction in energy consumption per vehicle produced. And so that number means so much more to someone who's not familiar with sustainability in the industry, so the consumers, because you could say, hey, my car that I am purchasing had 35% reduction, and that is a huge claim. It's a huge benefit in order to be able to really sell their products. They also saw a 20% decrease in their emissions from their operations. Most importantly, and what I love most about this case study is that they saved $17 million in energy costs. So not only are you doing the right thing for the planet and meeting your goals, but a lot of those efficiencies actually really ended up saving them money, especially on the energy demand side. And then finally, they were able to shift their Kentucky plant to renewable energy, 100%. And so, for them, that was really about achieving their net zero goal. And so this is such a great story, only because it really embodies the framework that GreenCircle has seen be very effective and easy to certify and recognize with your consumers. But it also brought in kind of innovation and smart technologies. And where Toyota, I think, did really well with this is really understanding all of the strategies and how they were going to work together to really get them to their goal. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time just talking through renewable energy. So Toyota's, did a lot of energy efficiency, but they also were very aware that they needed energy and that they wanted to be more responsible about sourcing that. And so why would they want to do that? And so the biggest takeaway for me is, that renewable energy is renewable. So we're not going to run out of it. We will have the sun, we will have the wind. And so that in and of itself is a benefit. But I also wanted to highlight some of the other things that I have mentioned, but really for renewable energy, beyond the environmental benefits, the economic growth that I've talked about, the energy security, knowing that we're going to have a future with renewable resources, but also on the social side, so really committing to public health, making the world a good place to live for our kids and for future generations. But more importantly, I think for me, it's about accessibility. And for those developing countries that are building their infrastructure, they can make good decisions about what type of energy infrastructures to put in place and that type of thing, and really, not having to depend on a very regionally located energy source and having that security. And so it makes it more affordable and more accessible from a social aspect. And so renewable energy has more than just the environmental benefits. Definitely with the way that we're trying to innovate, bringing in that economic growth and consistency, so we're not hindering our progress there, but then also making choices to make sure that it's better for our society and it's better for a specific region like a developing country. So I have another quick case study that I wanted to use to kind of show how this has been super effective. Really looking at, so Visa wanted to transition its largest data center to 100% renewable energy. And they had, some goals that they had in place from a global initiative that they really wanted to meet. And so they partnered with Shell to create a customized multi-year agreement to supply renewable energy to their data center in Virginia. and really emphasizing solar power. And so with this partnership, then they were able to reduce their carbon impact. And Virginia specifically had policies and regulations around clean economy and solar job growth, that kind of thing. But for them, the bigger result, I think, is that by purchasing 100% renewable energy, they were expecting to reduce their scope 2 emissions by 90% compared to their baseline. And I think this is a huge example where you don't see the benefit unless you know what your baseline is, unless you have that gray bar, right? And so the value here was really around, how they partnered between Shell and Visa to really build the infrastructure that they needed in order to make this transition. And then I, applaud Visa for targeting their largest data center, making sure that they understood where they were going to have the biggest impact, was also something I really feel like they did very, very well with this type of strategy. So we have our last poll coming up. And it is really, just an insightful question. Which of the following do you see as the biggest barrier to adopting renewable energy for you? Is it just overall cost, access, it's not as available, or the infrastructure isn't great where you are, or it's too much of a challenge to do those operational adjustments like equipment? Waiting for the results. Ooh, cost. So cost is our biggest one. That makes sense. It's a lot of investment, and being very aware of how that investment is going to give you savings. It's going to give you that return. And then it looks like access and equipment are smaller, on the smaller side. And really being able to have the money to drive those changes is important. And so one of the big pieces then in understanding those challenges and understanding challenges with your product sustainability recognition is, how do you recognize, how do you tell your consumers so that they can understand, what you're doing, but also so that you can actually measure and understand the return on that investment if you decided, for example, to invest in solar power. How do you justify that cost? And so for the last 10, 15 minutes, I really want to spend a little bit of time introducing you and talking a little bit about a specific certification that GreenCircle has, why it works, and what certifications can really bring forward in this overall kind of framework and strategy for reducing your GHG emissions. And so all of these sustainability energy practices will fit into that decarbonization plan, right? And that approach, that framework that we showed you. But the more important part is, how do you then recognize that and be able to share your story and share all of the work and measure it in a way that is valid, it's relevant, it's accurate, and really gives you that peace of mind that you're not greenwashing. And so that's where GreenCircle certifications can be really helpful. And so we have a new certification called Sustainable Energy Practices. And so the goal of this certification is to provide third-party verification. So third-party means we're not biased, we're subject matter experts, so we're really able to review and give you feedback in a very integrity way, but also help give you that credibility from a third party. And so for this, we're really looking for energy improvements in the manufacturing. And the biggest piece, which I talked about our framework and our definition before, is that we want to recognize that at the product level, so that you're able to really stand out from a marketing perspective, but also just to be able to confidently go to your consumers and say, this is what we're doing and this is how it's impacting your product. And so for this standard, we have three pathways and three pieces that we're recognizing for energy improvements, which I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail. One is when we've been talking about the energy usage reduction of fossil fuels, and then increasing your renewable or carbon-free energy use. And so a couple of things I just wanted to call out before I dive into these. What we don't consider as methods of achievement here is really, really important. So trying to understand how we're recognizing it, but also just for you guys to know that we put a lot of thought into how we're measuring this, how we're defining it. And so things like our absolute energy reduction. So we won't recognize if you just had a decrease in production, and that's the only reason you're using less energy. If your increased renewable or carbon-free electricity results from a positive change in your electrical grid, so things that you're not driving, things that you're not incorporating, and then looking at this standard is very important to look at a product level. So understanding how we can look at it from a specific single product line within a multi-line manufacturing facility. So we will look at just at the product level. And so the three pathways and improvements that we're recognizing, the first I wanted to dive into, and we've talked a little bit about this already in terms of the guidance for our framework and how we define it, is energy usage reduction. And so this is really about how have you changed your operations, how have you changed to incorporate those conservation measures. And again, we're assessing against that gray bar, that baseline. What are you doing today, and how did those strategies actually help you achieve that? But then also looking at it at a per product level. And so we're going to evaluate, we do a comprehensive analysis of all of your operations, energy consumption, and the improvements that you put in place. And for us, that means that we want to look at all of the manufacturing facilities, not just one, so that we can give it to you at a per product recognition. And so that's really where then you get this great outcome. We're able to give you a verified energy usage reduction, and that we've certified that the percentage of reduction per product is accurate, so that you can communicate that to your customers. The second one pathway is recognizing sustainable reduction of fossil fuels. So on-site fossil fuel sources, have been replaced. That's what we're really looking at here, with lower carbon energy alternatives such as electric heating compared to natural gas, that type of thing. And again, we're going to compare to that baseline, and we're also going to look at it with benchmark to production so that we can do that per product confirmation and give you that percentage so that you can share it with your customers. The one thing that I did want to just call out for this pathway is that we're really looking at the on-site fossil fuel reduction has to really directly impact your scope 1 and scope 2 reduction. So really trying to make that correlation to, yes, reducing your fossil fuel or replacing it with a lower carbon energy alternative did have a positive impact on your overall emissions. And so again, you'll have this verified on-site fossil fuel usage reduction, and then certification that the reduction percentage per product is something that you can then recognize and put on your packaging. And then lastly, the great complement to energy efficiency, which is renewable energy. Excuse me. So renewable carbon-free energy usage is really centered around incorporating that as a strategy. And how do we recognize that? So for us, it's an increase in renewable energy per product. And it's demonstrated by a company to shift to carbon-free electricity or renewable energy compared to, again, their baseline and then benchmark to production. And so we will, again, do this comprehensive analysis of all of the operations, the energy consumption, and the improvements that you're putting in place, incorporating all of the manufacturing facilities for specific products so that we can be as accurate as possible for the per product confirmation. And so then again, what you get is a verified energy usage reduction and this certified of the percent reduction for your product. So, that is the kind of standard framework, but how does that actually translate to requirements? And so for us, it's really about getting the right mix and balance of data so that we can properly verify. And so for that, we're looking for 2 years of energy consumption data. And we need that data to really validate the type, the output size, the location, if you're choosing to incorporate renewable or carbon-free energy sources. And for energy reduction efforts specifically, we're going to be looking for information on those changes, on those improvements that you put in place, specifically around operational changes, behavior changes, building or equipment upgrades, and kind of going back to our overall carbon decarbonization approach. What are all of those ways, those strategies that you're putting in, and what impact do they have so that we can measure it? And so minimum of 2 years production data, and then we will need access to the manufacturing site. We do an audit to ensure that everything that is submitted is on the up and up and that we can verify it. Most of the audits for GreenCircle are conducted virtually, but we do have some that we do in person as well. And so it really depends on the size and where you're located. So great, you've done all of this work, you've incorporated your improvements, you've sent us the data. What does the certification actually get you? And so for us, it's really about recognition. So we want to give you a third-party verified per product reduction. And so you will get a certificate that states that from us. That's very specific in the reduction that you achieved and how you achieved it. You also are able to use, and I'll show you in just a few slides, you're also able to use the GreenCircle certified mark on your packaging, in your digital content, all of that. And then the other piece I wanted to highlight is our certified sustainability facts label. And so part of what we really want to try to do at GreenCircle is really, again, promote that transparency. And so this label incorporates sustainable energy practices as a certification so that you can include it on your label and show. So example, you can see under climate health for this particular product, they were choosing to showcase their sustainable energy practices and their energy usage reduction. And so this is a great way to, again, I think, look at it holistically from a product perspective, right, with this type of label so that you can really, align our CSF label. As you can see, the headers align with the Mindful Materials Common Framework. And so we're really trying to standardize that. And sustainable energy practices is a huge piece of that. And so not only do you get this like per product reduction, you're also able to fit that into your overall story of sustainability. What are you doing on waste? What are you doing for product optimization, for social health and equity? And so this is a great way to really continue to support that overall process for sustainable products. Talking a little bit about our process. So what's the process to do a certification like this? So we have a proven process that really we guide you through every step of the way. You get a dedicated project manager, and we have templates that make it easy for you to submit your data, questions answered, all of that. And then at the end, while you get kind of led through your journey, then you'll get a lot of marketing support. We have a lot of guidelines, toolkits you can use, and working with our marketing team to really get the most out of your certification and really being able to kind of share your story and spread the news. And so most cases, the timeline is dependent on how quickly we can get through the process. And so usually we're looking at somewhere at least 75 days, but it does depend, you guys, on just like how long it takes to develop the data to get us the information that we need. So what are the benefits of certification? So really for me, what I want to highlight here is that you're measuring. And that measurement that we're giving you with this framework, with this certification, is valid, it's relevant, it's all of those, but it's credible. And so it gives you that peace of mind that you can tell that story and know that we're backing it up, and looking at your baseline, being able to really systematically and consistently measure. And really, you know, for you then it takes away all the risk and the protection that you need for greenwashing claims, really looking and being able to continue to move forward. So once you get data, you'll be able to then continuously improve and continuously measure. You know, we are a really want to bring our expertise. So we're really, you know, here as a subject matter expert, and we really want you to leverage that expertise and stay ahead of your competitors with this type of recognition. And so one highlight, so you get the certificate, you can have the labels, all that, but what I wanted to really show you guys quickly was just that we're looking at, you know, certifications are more than just checking a box, saying that you have a certification. It really is a tool for you to be able to confidently tell your story in a lot of different avenues. And so you can see the couple of examples that we have, you know, being able to put the mark on your actual product packaging, like the Post-its, incorporating it into your digital content from a marketing perspective, the LinkedIn posts, you know, using a certified sustainability facts label to comprehensively tell your sustainability story is an amazing way to really succinctly communicate and recognize and really just partner with us to tell your story so that your consumers are aware of everything that you're doing. And so we're going to just wrap up. I have a couple of just like last slides, and then we'll get to any questions. So just wanted to incorporate some resources. If you're interested in more information, GreenCircle is here to help. And so, you know, definitely check out our website, check out the white papers that we have. You know, we're more than happy to, you know, share and collaborate and get feedback on that. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was just like what's next for GreenCircle. So one of the things that is really, really important to us is to, again, continue to tell this holistic story of sustainability for your products. And so as you've seen today, sustainable energy practices are critical. They're the most needed in order for us to really have this reduction that we need in GHG emissions. And so we've got a new certification, a new verification that's coming out called GHG verification, and we're doing limited assurance. And so this is where we're going to look at scope 1, scope 2, and the same type of framework, how you're meeting GHG protocols. You know, it will help you meet the mandated reporting requirements. It will give you, again, a third-party verification so that you can have confidence in your data and the emissions that you're reporting. And more importantly for me, it's really, again, helping you recognize your sustainability strategies and how you're measuring their impact on carbon footprint at a product level. And that is really the important story, and how the certification mark, our GreenCircle mark, really helps you with that in the end when you're pushing your products out to your consumers. So we're really excited about that. More to come on this service, and hopefully, you know, you'll see a webinar soon from us on that as well. And so at the end, we will have a survey. It's just a quick survey that will pop up. It's definitely optional, but we would love your feedback if you can give it to us. You know, honest feedback really gives us the most value so that we can bring content and things that are relevant and helpful for you guys. And then again, we'll get to questions. We've got 7 minutes, so if we don't get to any questions that are in there, we'll definitely reach out. So I'm going to put my contact info on the screen. Please reach out, questions, feedback, just want to connect. I would love to talk to anybody and always have that in the back of my brain. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out or to connect. Would love to hear from you. So I'm going to check in with my team. Questions?
Hey, Sarah, it's Tad, if you can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely a few questions here. So one of the questions is, do RECs count toward renewable energy usage?
Do you want to answer, Tad, or do you want me to?
I'm happy to do it. I mean, we definitely, I think that renewable energy credits absolutely do work for this. However, there are requirements around that in terms of the vintage of those, in terms of the Green E certification, the length of the contract, that kind of thing. I mean, oftentimes when it comes to renewable energy, there's definitely a look, people are definitely looking more at some longer term commitments like virtual power purchase agreements or, longer term engagements. Some companies do have on-site solar and whatnot, but renewable energy credits can definitely count. And again, there are some stipulations around that, and we would have to understand the arrangement, that kind of thing. So yeah, that would definitely contribute.
And one thing that I'll add to that is just like making sure that you understand how you're documenting it, especially even on, are they retiring them? Like we will ask over time, and especially as we're monitoring and surveilling after you've been certified. And so it's something just to keep in mind, that the documentation for those is really helpful and will make it an easier process for us to use those towards that recognition.
Okay, and then another one came in, is the Sustainable Energy Practices certification less applicable to companies that are service providers and not product manufacturers?
So I would say no. I think the important piece for us is that if you are a product manufacturer, being able to tell a per product story is helpful. But I think in looking at that framework, being able to measure and understand those strategies, benchmarking is really critical. And I think for us, being able to benchmark to production is how we want to, communicate that percent reduction. Tad, anything you want to add for that one?
Yeah, I would say that for service providers, they're mainly going to have buildings and fleets and things like that. There can be ways of evaluating those improvements. I mean, obviously, if you're making big changes in your operations or even in your fleet and you've reduced energy consumption, we would just need a metric to measure it in terms of some intensity value. And sometimes that could be per mile driven, or if you're looking at a fleet, or it could be per square foot. Like oftentimes you look at energy improvements from a per square foot basis. That's a good way to look at it, and sustainable energy practices contributing to that is one way that can be done for sure. I would also say that the certification, the third-party assurance, a limited assurance that's going to be done, that would be very applicable to a company, because that will look at absolute emission reductions and total GHG accounting for scope 1 and 2. So that would be one where service providers, that will probably be required of service providers, especially you can get additional points for that if you submit to CDP, or if you're a supplier to somebody that's asking you for your scope 3 emissions and they want assurance on your scope 1 and 2, that would absolutely apply to service providers as well as manufacturers. We have one other question here. Can you talk a little more about the documentation you would require to complete the certification? I think what that means is, like, how do you verify like an energy efficiency improvement is done?
And I think it depends on, really we're going to be looking at basic data. So we want to see energy consumption. And I think that it really depends on your operations. And so GreenCircle, our project managers will work directly with you to make sure that, if you have a subset of data that you are looking at from a particular system or a particular utility, for example, how can we incorporate that and use that data? The other thing that we have is templates. And so we'll send you data templates to give you a good idea of the types of information that we're looking for, and at what level of detail that's important. And that's really where having a dedicated project manager from us is helpful, because we're here to just walk you through the process and to really try to make sure that we are using as much as possible what you already have available, and not make that process harder. And so I think a little bit of it is dependent on your operations, but most of it will be, a lot of guidance from your project manager to be able to balance what you already have available and how you're measuring that data.
Yeah, and oftentimes the documentation that would be required for, say, an energy efficiency measure would be, you know, basically showing if you bought a piece of equipment or you installed LED light bulbs or you made some process change, there'd have to be like maybe the purchasing records, you know, that kind of thing in terms of the documentation that we would verify for any kind of energy efficiency. Same thing with renewable energy. You'd be looking very closely at the contracts you've signed, the certificates, you know, that kind of thing. Or if you have on-site renewables, for example, you'd have to verify that you own the RECs, you know, like you have the system on your building and you own the RECs. And then last question before we wrap up here. I work for a large company. How do I get started with compiling this data, and who in my company would be best to speak to in order to get this information?
I think that is something where GreenCircle can help, for sure. If you're, you know, interested in pursuing this, take a look at the standard, take a look at the audit plan that we have on our website. It's going to help you really understand what data you need, but how we're going to measure it. And then for me, I think it's really about aligning around your operations. And so really getting with those folks that are responsible for making those decisions, but also tracking from so on the regulatory side and the quality side as well. You know, I think that it is an effort. And that's why we wanted to put forward a framework like this so you can kind of understand how to get to your end goal, how to get to that measure and that metric that you want. And, you know, so for us, it's really, you know, centered around how your operations is structured and the management there, but also on the quality side. Tad, is there anything you wanted to add for that one?
No, that's great. And I do think we're right at time. So I think it's, and I think we nailed all the questions. So
thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you learned a little bit more about sustainable trends, but also, you know, kind of GreenCircle's framework for looking at energy efficiency and reduction of fossil fuels and renewable energy increases, all of that, and how it contributes. Would love to connect, like I said, so please take my contact information and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.